Hi, this is Phil Carlton, and I saw a question this morning, and I've seen the same question 2 or 3 times in the last couple of weeks, so I thought I would maybe do a quick video about it. I will say, if you haven't yet, you can find me over on YouTube under my name, Phil Carlton, and you can also find me on Facebook under Premiere Plus Phil, so make sure to follow because I'll keep posting different videos. So having said that, let's get on into this piece. So the question was basically, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the frame that someone was looking at. So I've gone in Premiere Plus 2 Embroidery to the Frames tab, and the first 4 sets of frames that we have, applique shields, have applique pieces in them. So they have the placement stitch, the tack down, what we think of as an applique when we work in machine embroidery. But they were looking at, under Contemporary 1, it was this 6th frame, which is kind of a scalloped edge, and they were wanting to know how to turn this into an applique, so they could put like a monogram on the inside or something like that. So the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about the frame. You'll notice it came in with green handles. Now the green handles tell me it's something that was digitized or created here in Premiere Plus 2 Embroidery. So if I make it larger or smaller, it will regenerate the stitches rather than just trying to resize it. I'm going to undo that, take it back to the standard size for this one. The other thing that we can change when we're working with our frames, and they have the green handles, is we can look at the properties. So if I right click, my property setting here would let me change the size of it, but I want to look here at satin line. So the satin line is going to let me tell it how large I want this satin stitch to be on this frame. And for an applique, I generally like to go between about 4 and 6 millimeters so that I have plenty of stitch covering up the edge when I trim it. So I'm going to just change this width here to, I'll take it to about a 4.0. I think that will work just fine for this one. And I'm going to click OK. So now I have a 4 millimeter satin stitch in this frame. The next thing we want to do is add the applique piece to it. So we're going to want to add a placement stitch and a tack down stitch. The Applique tab is a little, you kind of have to understand what this does, and I know I did a different video where I talked about the Applique tab, but it's important to remember that the Applique tab doesn't add stitches. It lets you insert a piece of fabric so you can visualize what the applique is going to look like, and then also you could then send that piece of fabric to an electronic cutter if you were using one, but that will not add our placement stitch and our tack down stitch. So we also have a border tab that will add a square border or a border around the selected shape. But we're going to go over to a different module to create this. So I'm going to go to the Home tab, and I'm going to click on Copy to add this to my clipboard down in the lower right-hand corner. And then I'm going to pop over to Premiere Plus 2 Modify. In the quick links, it's going to be that third icon. And Premiere Plus 2 Modify is the tool that will let us insert or change things at the stitch level. I'm going to go back to the Home tab for a second and click Paste. Notice it's saying now this design contains information that might be fixed as embroidery stitches. So it's a frame. I could change the properties and have those green handles. When I bring it over to Modify, I have to say, let's turn this into stitches. So I'm going to click OK. Now this is working at the stitch level. I'm going to go to the Border tab. And on the Border tab, we do have a new tool in Premiere Plus 2 Embroidery that would find the edge, and you can adjust how far away from something you want to create a border, and notice it's finding stitches or areas on the inside and the outside. But I'm going to right click because I don't want to really add this placement line around the outside. I want my placement and tack down stitch to be right in the center of this line. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab my Zoom to Rectangle tool, and I'm going to zoom in so I can really see this shape, and I'll have to scroll up and down a little. But then I'm going to manually set the points where I want this applique to be. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk a little about let me just add the stitches first, or tell it where I want. So I'm going to come to the far left under Border Line and choose Freehand Point Border Line. And this is going to let me set points where I want to create my border or my stitches. I'm going to start here at the top center, and I'm going to hold down a control point so that I get a nice corner point. And then for each of these little scallops, 2 points should give me a nice even curve. I'm just kind of making sure that that line is falling right in the center of this line. That way I know my placement stitch and my tack down stitch will be right there in the middle of my shape. I rolled my wheel on my mouse to scroll down a little bit. And again, at all these points, I'm just holding down the control key. So let me get this finished up. I'm happy with all those points now. I just went in and with the borderline tool, freehand point borderline, set points all the way around my shape and just tried to travel right there in the center of that line. Now I'm going to work my way across. I don't have to worry about a shape here because I've already drawn my shape. I'm not going to use the automatic tool today. I need to tell it what type of border I'm trying to create, and this is where it can be a little bit confusing. I'm going to leave this on the satin stitch because, and I'll show you why, it'll make sense in just a minute. I do want to click the button here to add an applique. So when I add an applique, I'm telling it when it creates it. Let's look at these options for a second. I'm telling it I want it to create a standard applique. So that means it's going to create a placement stitch for me, a tack down stitch for me, and then it's going to create the final border based on whatever stitch type I have specified here. And I'm going to leave this at satin stitch. For applique piece margin, I'm going to take that down to 0, which means it's going to create my placement stitch and my tack down stitch right in the center of this shape. If you're unsure about these settings here in the applique options, I have a separate video out on YouTube where I really talk about the different applique pieces. So I'm going to click OK, and now I'm ready to create this border. Now if I click Create External Border, it's going to remove all of the stitches outside my shape. If I click Create Internal Border, it's going to remove all the stitches inside my shape. So I'm going to click the third option here, which is Create Overlay Border, which is going to put my stitches right on top of the shape. But as I click this, I want you to notice right now in the film, or in my color list, I have one light blue, which is the color of this border. When I click Create Overlay Border, it has added 2 color stops. So I want to walk through the 3 colors and talk about what we're seeing now. So across the control strip at the bottom, I have a tool here called Draw Next Color Block that will let me walk through my colors one at a time. I'm going to go ahead and click Zoom to Fit so we can see the entire design. Scroll in, or zoom in just a little bit more. Now as I walk through my colors, this is going to be my first color, color number 1, and that's going to have my placement line. We can see a little stop command, so after it does the placement stitch, it's going to stop. We would lay down the piece of fabric. It's going to then do a tack down stitch. It's going to stop again, and we would trim the fabric away. Then we would go to color number 2, which is the border that we brought over from embroidery. So if we look at color number 1 and color number 2 now, we've added all the applique information we need into this shape. Color number 3, let me hide those two. Turn on color 3 is the border that I drew by hand. Now I don't actually need that border, so I'm just going to delete it. So with colors number 1 and 2 unchecked, I know those stitches are hidden, so I cannot select them, I cannot remove them, I can't accidentally get rid of them. So now I can just go to the Home tab. I'm going to click Select All Visible and click Delete. And then when I come across the control strip all the way to the right, I'm going to click on a tool called Draw All Stitches, which will just turn all of my stitches back on. And now we have that nice completed applique design. If I open up the design player and just drag through it, we will see again, it's going to do my placement stitch. It's going to bring in the fabric. It's going to do a double stitch to tack down my fabric. I trim it away, and then it's going to finish with that border that we brought in from embroidery. So that's how easy it is to bring an existing design into the Modify module, and on the Border tool, use the freehand point border line to manually tell it where you want to create a custom border and turn your design into an applique. I hope you've learned something, and I thank you very much.